Since fights to the finish have been abolished, we've had to rely on the referee, the judges outside the ropes, or a combination of the two to render a decision if it went the distance. And down the years, we've come to realise boxing is a really subjective sport to score. Still, there have been times when we must question, and we all have, whether they were blind or whether there was some real corruption at hand. You'll note that all of these picks are from pretty recent times, and that's a combination of the older fights being hard to find each individual round of them and critique them yourself, and also I believe the idea of trying to protect name fighters or brands has become much more common. Either way, here's my top 5 worst scorecards in boxing history. At number 5, Carlos Ortiz Jr. scores the fight between Ricky Burns and Ray Beltran, which was for Burns' WBO lightweight title. For Burns, 115-112. It was officially a draw. It never was a draw, really, but to score it for Burns after him getting his jaw broke, after being bullied around the ring for the majority of it by an active Manny Pacquiao sparring partner, getting floored as well in the process, it really just had you thinking, hometown decision of the highest order. Burns had been WBO champ for about a year and a half. I think Eddie Hearn liked the fact he had a fighter in Scotland which hasn't produced as many champions as England and Wales. So he liked to use Burn, a very tough but not spectacular fighter, to try and grow that market. And it really was just a shameless decision. At the end of the fight in the dressing room, pretty down, understandably down, Ray Beltran kind of eloquently put it about when they asked him what was it about, and he was just politics. They're protecting the brand. He was pretty hard done by. At number 4, James Ged O'Connor and Peter Trematera both score the fight between Sergio Martinez and Kermit Cintron at 154 pounds, 113-113, a draw. Now that's bad enough in a fight that Martinez deserved to get the nod in, but this fight isn't so much about those scorecards as it was the fact that Martinez had already technically won the fight. This was a collective debacle between the judges and the referee. In round 7, Martinez threw a left hand that kind of grazed but hurt Cintron. He took a knee, he stayed there till 10, he got up, and it was somehow decided that a butt had been landed, that they must carry on the fight, and it was unbelievable. On the replays you can see there was no head contact. Martinez just had to laugh, and then he was also later docked a point for hitting behind the head when it was Cintron who was bending down. It just had so many woeful things about it. I don't think I can think of another fight in which a guy, having been not allowed to knock out his opponent, was then denied the win on the scorecards. At number 3, Dwayne Ford scores the first fight between Manny Pacquiao and Timothy Bradley, 115-113 to Desert Storm Bradley. Now, we know CJ Ross had the same scorecard, and we'll get onto her in a second, but it was really the round selections, how he scored the fight, Dwayne Ford, which is what made it very odd, giving rounds 5 and 9 to Bradley, which is very, very confusing. I think in that fight, the first 10 rounds, Pacquiao at least wins 8 of the first 10, thus already guaranteeing him victory. It was, of course, a very controversial decision. I remember at the time a lot of articles were asking for some action to be taken, for somebody to be taken to court, for something to be done. It didn't happen. As we know, CJ Ross was allowed to continue with a reign of terror. At number 2, CJ Ross scores the fight between Floyd Mayweather and Canelo Alvarez, 114-114, a draw. Crazy stuff. I do know Adelaide Bird's card in the first Golovkin-Canelo fight, 118-110 to Canelo, only giving Golovkin 2 rounds, is very difficult to swallow. But the difference here is that, at least in that first Golovkin-Canelo fight, at least Canelo was doing things. At least even in the rounds that Golovkin won, Canelo was still landing some shots. He was still trying to implement his game plan. In this fight between Mayweather and Canelo, Mayweather straight away turned it into a long-distance boxing match. His defense just pretty much undid even any kind of jabs Alvarez was trying to get going. It was a very easy fight to score. Mayweather said, "We're boxing at my level. You're not going to be able to do anything about it." And he wasn't able to do anything about it. So how you can give Canelo 6 rounds? Does anyone think he won 1 round in that fight? I think I can maybe give him a share of 2. Did he win? Was it a 10-10 the first round through inactivity? It's just, he didn't win a single round, and yet somehow CJ Ross, in what I believe was her last ever, not surprising, role as a judge, gives him 6. Crazy stuff. And at number 1, Eugene Williams scores the first fight between Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield. 115-113, Evander Holyfield. Lennox Lewis wasn't even really pushed or stressed at any point in this fight in what was almost like a calmly given boxing lesson. Very easy to see who the winner was. But it was the manner in which Eugene Williams scored this fight that made it unbelievable. The only real bit of drama that happened in what was otherwise a bit of a letdown for such a big heavyweight fight at the time was in the 5th round when Lennox Lewis pinged Holyfield. He appeared to make a bit of a dent in the real deal, followed up his advantage a little bit and got him into a spot of bother on the ropes. Easily the most dominant round of the fight by either fighter. No question Lewis's round in what was definitely his fight, and somehow, some way, Eugene Williams scored it for Evander Holyfield. Surely corruption. Now, the punch stats, apparently they're not always the most accurate these days, but if there's anything remotely accurate about the punch stats that were given in this fight, Lennox Lewis threw over 600, he landed almost 350. That's a 57% connect ratio in the heavyweight division. That is massive. Whereas Evander Holyfield, let me just check this. What are the stats here? Holyfield throws nearly 400 and only lands 130 at a much lower connect ratio. So purely on stats as well, if they're at all accurate, absolute domination by Lennox Lewis. Probably the worst decision I'll ever see.